You're listening to the podcast called What No One Knows. I'm your host, Lisa Marie Garcia. Please join us as I talk with some of the most important influencers, from entrepreneurs to C-suites to founders to venture capitalists. You will want to know their answer to the question, what no one knows. Thank you for joining. Okay, thank you for listening. Thank you for joining us on the podcast, What No One Knows. My name is Lisa Marie Garcia, and I'm very happy to be taping this show for broadcast at Wave Studio One with the Tampa Bay Wave offices in beautiful downtown Tampa. I haven't been outside much today, so I don't know if it's raining or if it's sunny and what is it, humid.
Yeah,
So,
well, I can tell you that it's all of the above.
all of the above. That sounds right, right,
Yes.
for our day. Well, thank you for joining us. That's Manny Hernandez-Agosto, and we're very happy to have you here. You're the Dean of the College of Business at St. Petersburg College, and a very busy, busy individual. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course, thank you for the invitation.
All right, well, we're going to dig in because you have quite the background around entrepreneurship, mentorship, academia, all of that. You got so much to share. So let's just jump right in. And actually, let's start with your work with the younger generation and talk about you've been a part of the board of the Junior Achievement. You're working with the local Junior Achievement. Is it the Tampa?
It was at the Bay County area.
The Bay
Yes.
County.
So I'm born and raised in Puerto Rico. So I lived there, for the first 30 years of my life, and about, almost 13 years now, almost 13. I moved to the U.S. In the mainland, to the Panhandle. So I was in Panama City as an associate professor there for entrepreneurship. And in my opportunity working with students and working with different entrepreneurial programs, I got the opportunity to meet the leadership of Junior Achievement of Bay County. And then I joined their board. They invited me. Great experience, and definitely learn how they're trying to really achieve what a lot of us in higher education are also trying to achieve, which is some of the topics of entrepreneurship and saving and financial literacy, among others.
So that makes sense then. So their values align in also what you do at the St. Petersburg College. So you had I was asking you about your latest speaking engagement, and it actually was just a couple of days ago this week, Monday. And again, feeding, as you were the keynote speaker, that age group. So talk about it. It was a high school
Yes.
Hispanic.
So the college does a celebration as an opening to Hispanic Heritage Month, where they invite all the top academic students from a Hispanic heritage background to basically our two main campuses. Most campuses do it, but some of our bigger campuses. So this event was for our downtown and Gibbs campus area, basically kind of South County area for Pinellas County. And they usually have like a speaker that will share a little bit about the story and what is the importance of coming from the same background and having some level of success that they can relate to. So that was this past Monday, as we mentioned, about close to 500 attendees between the students and their families, and it was interesting just because when they actually came across the stage, and they were shaking hands because we were giving them a scholarship. I was surprised with how many actually did share that they were either connected or impacted or related to the story in some way as to some of the struggles that you have to go through before you can achieve what others might see as success.
What do you think? I love that they were given scholarships, and that what do you think is a disadvantage from that particular, Hispanic section of students to get to higher education, like you said? I mean, obviously, the financial for everyone. I mean, I'm a poor mom of college students. It's very, very expensive, even with merit all of the scholarships that you can qualify for and Bright Futures. I mean, so there's that factor, but maybe beyond that factor, are there other factors that you think are unique to Hispanic high school students in general, or
Definitely. I mean, you have the regular challenges of just being a teenager,
right,
and dealing with that process. but then you add the element of your, demographic group, and then you add the element of your nationality, right? Which particular Latin country you're coming from, and then or your heritage is from, and how do you match all those different things and expectations? So when you look at the students, the reality is that there's a pressure, especially in academia, right? Where there's an expectation of where you should go, what you should be, and how you should perform. And it could come from your family, it could come from your friends, it could come from both, or society in general. So the reality is that if students remove all those barriers, which is almost impossible, the reality is that you could do college at no cost. Do you have colleges like ours that right now, for example, we have a scholarship for 8 different high schools in our county, that just by graduating from that particular high school of one of those 8, you have a guaranteed 2-year degree. Um, if you do an enrollment, you can actually almost do an associate's degree at no cost. But then, of course, the schools have a different program that competes with dual enrollment. So that means that, maybe yes, maybe no. But there's different ways you could do it. And I think it's all that confusion and all that pressure that really makes it harder for them to make a decision. And then at the end of the day, not doing anything is a decision.
That's right.
And sadly but true, that's what I would say 20% of so make that choice. And the reason why I know that is because we started an actual entrepreneurial initiative about a year and a half ago with one of our local partners in Pinellas County, because the school came to us and said, "Hey, Emmanuel, we did a survey with our high school seniors, and we kind of got scared a little bit because about 40% of them shared that they were not planning to go to school, but they were not also planning to work. Maybe have some sort of job or part-time job, but not like an actual career plan." And the only thing that kind of came out of that survey was that they were somewhat interested in maybe having their own business. So that's when they reached out to us and said, is there something we could do at the high school level to maybe nurture that? And hopefully that will be enough to get them on a track to either choose a career pathway or industry or college education or both. And that means that, once I started talking to other high school principals and assistant principals, they kind of share the same. So some of them did have some other surveys to validate that. Others was more anecdotal. But still, it's a big portion of our students that, they just freeze and, they don't move forward.
Very interesting. And that sounds like a great program. And if at least you got them in the door, that's always the first step. Then you can try to influence them anyway, entrepreneurship or not, or college or trade or whatever it is. I love that. Super important. I guess for me, from my background and what I've experienced is, I think that it's what I think holds some students back. Definitely not due to the parents not wanting to hold them back, but the issue is that the parents don't have the understanding that there's these scholarships available, that they should be, filling out the Common App in a certain way. I mean, it's a lot of work to get kids in colleges and get the right test scores and all of that. And I feel like I'm a fairly, hands-on competent person. I'll tell you, we missed a lot of things, and I had 2 daughters that were both really on it, and they knew more about it than I did. But even with that, it still is a lot for parents to learn, to know, to do at the right time, and all of that. So it's difficult for all.
And you are correct. Actually, we are going through the same conversation because as we were talking offline, my daughter, it's a sophomore right now, but she's having all these questions, and I've worked in this industry almost 20 years now. And when she was asking us all these questions, my wife was there, and of course, my wife will have her input as a mom.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I said to my daughter, kind of on our way to school, whenever you have questions, it's okay to ask both of us. Just don't do it at the same time. Just because mom has a perspective, and I will tell you what I do for a living. So, but it's true. there's so much information because, for example, my wife, she came from private sector. She was an accountant and a CFO, but her passion was always to teach. So, she's now a Spanish teacher. So she sees the high school information, and she sees what the advisors and the counselors and all the information that gets flooded into the high school then floods the student's brain, and that's information she had. But I'm on the other side of the equation once you cross that lake of information, and it's completely different. Now if you're talking about universities, then that's a whole nother world, because I represent the state college system, which we came from the community college system. And in very nature and mission, we're still a community college. It's just that we offer 4-year degrees. And most people don't know that state colleges offer 4-year degrees. So our process is much streamlined because, we are an open doors institution. If you have the minimum requirements, you are admitted. You just apply for the sake of being accepted into the system so we can process your application, but it's not that you're competing for a spot, as opposed to universities that you are competing for a spot. And for example, I was telling my daughter that, the advantage of going to a state college, which again, a lot of people don't know this, is that when you go to a university as a freshman, well, you're competing with another 20,000 people that want to get in. Versus if you go as a sophomore, because now you have an associate, you're only competing with those that made it that far. And most likely, if you come through a transfer program, you have a guaranteed admission, so it's even easier. But again, not that many people
know that.
Exactly.
My daughter's thinking of transferring next year.
So correct. Most people don't know that. And for example, another thing is that if we go back to cost, students don't know that certain institutions have a mandated requirement that if you're a freshman, you have to do on-campus housing. Some universities do that. And I was telling my daughter that, well, you can go to any Florida institution, but just so you know that even if you are driving distance, if that's a policy, you have to fulfill that policy. So that's an additional cost that maybe you are not thinking about because you think you can drive, but it's not an option. So it's all these little things that it's hard to consider. And then of course, if you are not involved in the industry, you will never know either way.
Right. No. Yeah. See, there's even more that I've learned even now, and it's been a journey, but all good stuff. And it's great that what St. Petersburg College does, and I did not know about the college system. So let's talk about, let's dig in a little bit to what your experience has been with the Wave as a mentor. We've met each other at a couple mentor advisor events, and just kind of tell people that might not even know about this mentor advisor role here at the Wave, if you will.
No, it's been great. Like I said, I was in Panama City in the Panhandle area, and I was there for 9 years. And then when my family decided to move here to Central Florida, we looked for different opportunities. And it's funny because I was looking for an actual faculty position because, that was my role, and not administration. I used to be an associate dean in my prior role back in Puerto Rico. So I wasn't necessarily looking for that, but, that was the opportunity that I saw, the one that I applied for, and, was blessed to be honored with. And so I've been here in the community, in Tampa Bay area, for 2 years now. And I will say within 6 months or so, I, learned about Wave, met a couple of the team members, and they've been so welcoming. So I think that when we started a relationship, we started talking about how can we maybe create a pipeline of our students to come and participate in some of the acceleration programs. And I guess through those conversations, they saw my passion to help others. And they said, well, Emmanuel, why don't you join us in some of our cohorts? They have the diversity cohort, they have the cybersecurity, fintech cohort, the Hispanic cohort. So, and I think that because those particular acceleration programs were so specific and mindful also about the kind of startup founders they wanted to bring on board, it really allowed me to identify with multiple things with them, either professionally or personally, and really add value. And even though, most of my background is in higher ed and, by default, ed tech, as, an evaluator of different vendors, even if the company didn't come from that background, I had the opportunity to see how you want to penetrate new markets just because of all the students I worked with and all of the enterprises I worked with as a professor, and when I was doing my dissertation in business incubators. So it was kind of, close to the heart and meaningful as I was getting to know the team. And of course, the founders are awesome as well. So it's always invigorating just to see the ideas they come up with, and how things that you would think that maybe it's not going to work, they actually make it work. So
Right.
always very inspiring.
The ideas are just off the wall sometimes. I mean, just you're like, what? Why didn't I think of that? Or, just next level ideas is what I've been, around when I'm working with the cohorts for sure. I mean,
Correct.
especially this last med tech. Did you work with the med tech group?
No, I
Also?
didn't have the opportunity. My schedule didn't match this time. Yes, I've been having a couple of conflicts there, but I'm looking forward to some of the upcoming cohorts are coming up now in
FinTech.
October and then in January. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's great. So as we're talking about, if you've not heard this with the Wave, so what they do is they have these cohort groups, and it's the best of the best, as I call it. I know the Latin Tech, there was like 2,500 applicants to get the 15. These crazy great cohorts that the Wave puts them through their accelerator program at no cost to them. The Tampa Bay Wave is a nonprofit, and they also don't take equity, which is very rare in this space of incubators and acceleration. So we'll just share that on the podcast, as this is about the Tampa Bay Wave work and entrepreneur type behavior. Speaking of that, since you are very much the expert, and I didn't know that was your dissertation, was on incubators and that. So you are probably so far my guest that has the most knowledge about the incubators, entrepreneurship, and all of that. So thank you, Emmanuel. So the question I have for you, though, is what do you think is one of the key characteristics of an entrepreneur that you think that person's going to be, that gal or that guy is probably going to be successful because I see the beginnings of a skill or of a talent or a trait?
Well, that's kind of a hard question because it's very kind of
Trying to
difficult
find
to
out your
identify.
question.
Yes, to find one thing that could help us predict that it's really hard. But I will say if there's a trait, I will say grit. And it's a mix trait between grit and flexibility, right? Sometimes when you get some of these founders, they're very attached to the idea as it was born or conceived. And, if you can pivot or maybe go into a different industry, it's kind of almost being like a musician, right? The few that I know, if they actually land a contract with a record label, it's possible that the record label will have an idea of, okay, this is the brand that you should be, or this is the brand that we want to build around you. Possibly that's not the art they were looking to do, right? The kind of music they were looking to do. And then it's not until they're finally, famous enough or, financially viable enough to stand on their 2 feet that, okay, well, I want to do my own thing now. It's kind of like that, they have their own music, they have their own art, but if they're not flexible to move where the opportunity is, then of course, their resiliency and that grit to really push through that, it's gonna be harder for them. So the ones that I've met that are able to do that and do it proudly, are the ones that tend to be successful. But like anything else, they can do it by themselves. They need a good support system, whether it's directly within the company or advisors. And that's the second trait. It's that they are great at building both support system, a great team and a great team of advisors.
That the mindset, it really is a mindset of being flexible, especially when, we were talking about in another show about ownership, taking ownership of your idea and all that. And unfortunately, though, you could have ownership and just hold on too tightly to, this is my vision, this is my idea, this is my vision of how I think it's going to move forward. And then you meet someone that tells you, hey, why don't you look at it this way? And if you don't have the flexibility of mindset because you're so dug in, right, that can really hurt you. And it's difficult to give it up and say, okay, let me step back and let me just, fine, I won't, let me hear what you have to say and think on it and look at it in a different way. And for me, that I just need the time. Like many times I'll say to my company, I'm going to seed on it. And I always, will seed on something if there's some high emotions, at least through the night. I need to just step away, think about it. Maybe, what I would have said, nope, that's not going to work right away in my mind. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to think about it. And maybe their perspective is right. So it is, I think, a real, I'm sure you agree, it's a real mindset.
Yes, and it's hard because in a way you have to do self-reflection,
Yeah.
right? And is there any ego too that you have to
Right.
let go of? And believe me, I've done a couple of those things in the past couple of years, and if it wasn't because I did that, maybe I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. So maybe I could have been better, but the only way to know if going back in time, and that's not doable yet. But that's true. I mean, it's not. It sounds easy, but it's not that easy.
Not all the time, right?
At least it doesn't feel that way.
No, it doesn't feel that way. And then grit, grit, perseverance. And I think that is definitely something that's learned because once you push through something, that helps you for the next one that you have to push through. And then finally then you learn, oh, okay, it's going to be hard. It might not be what I expected, but it will work out in the end in some way. But sometimes people give up until they get there. So you have to have the grit, right, to be a successful entrepreneur, to just keep on going no matter what.
Correct.
Take a break, take a rest, refuel, get help, but you got to keep going or not. So thank you for sharing that. I agree. Grit and flexibility for sure. So I knew this would go fast. I want to, before we get to our last question, what is your recommendation to maybe, first or second year college students or high school students going into college? What is good advice that you can give them to help them be successful to make it to the degree? I mean, I would tell my daughters before they got, what the percentages were of the people that don't make it first year. I mean, it's almost like business owners. There's a percentage first year that go to business, but it's true, in that first year in college, how many of them are going to make it to 4 years? And then I would tell them the why. So I'd like to hear from an actual expert.
Well, I will
what I
say
say.
it's just like you mentioned. It's just like having a business. You need a good team, meaning you need a good support that can help you handle the task of your coursework, right? Whether it's good study habits, accountability, motivation, and then you need a good support system from an advisory perspective. You need professors, you need people from industry, because at the end of the day, you know, the college experience is just a way to give you your basics, a baseline to understand where you want to go. But that doesn't mean that by itself it will give you everything you need, right? So when you look at famous entrepreneurs, Bill Gates and the founder of Facebook, etc., most people will talk about them and the institutions they attended and how they are college dropouts. And I guess like anything else, the media might focus too much on the dropout piece, but no one says anything that, well, they drop out for an Ivy League school, because the important thing there is that, well, just by attending and having access to that network, they were able to really open the door to the possibilities of what their inventions or, technologies could do. So same thing happens if you're in a smaller university or smaller college. You have those same resources around you. You just need to look for them. You just need to search for them. And don't hold yourself to those experiences. I remember, for example, when I went to college, I almost finished my college degree in 3 years because I was just like in high school, taking 7 classes per semester, just focus on studying, getting good grades. And I remember that an advisor almost on my third year said, well, Emmanuel, what are you doing? Because that's not college. That's the same as going to high school. What's the point of doing all your work and doing good grades and that's it? That's not where life is at. It's not in the books. So basically, I tried to do everything that I didn't do in my previous 3 years in my last year and a half and 1 year. So I went on, I did my study abroad program. I started doing every single business competition there was around. I joined clubs. I joined the chamber, you name it. And actually, that ended up helping me even more because by the time I was about to finish, I already had couple of job offers. I had the opportunity to, compete for some other scholarship for grad work. And the same way, when I was doing my grad work, I started engaging with my faculty members that, were from Europe, and, just see how could, tag along with their consultant work, even if I needed to carry just the books, just like a teacher's pet. But the idea was to get access to the room. So, because once you are there, it's your job to make people see you under a different light. Just because you arrive someplace as an assistant, just because you arrive someplace as not the person in charge, doesn't mean that you can't make that happen. So that's my suggestion to the students that are, in school. Yes, definitely focus on your schoolwork, but ensure that you have time to experience the through college experience. Build a good team, one or two good, close teammates, college students that can keep you accountable and help you to keep your routine from a studies perspective. But then branch out to your mentors, one or two solid faculty members that are influential, and one or two executive from maybe the same or different industries that you would like to explore that could be influential and give you access to the industry. I mean, you will be surprised how many students I personally share my information with them, and try to make sure that we can give them access. I invite them to some of these closed meeting rooms, and they either just don't reply back, and then maybe 3 months later down the road, or months, they want to do something, or they need a letter. And of course, you miss your opportunity because it's just either maybe that one time when that could change.
It's so great. I mean, the follow-up thing is definitely something I'm, mentoring my daughters. Follow up. Oh, I want to give two. I'm like, no, call now. I do have to go there with them, but I love that you said it's your job to have people see you, in a different light, a new light. I love that. That's 100% right. I mean, I know as an employer, you bring people on, and the main thing I'm looking for is a work ethic, right? So, and that means that if they need to be the first one to stand up at a meeting to go get someone a copy, do it. I don't care what the title, I do it, so I'm looking for that work ethic idea, but they could start at one level. But if I see that they have the skill to be a director or a manager, they just need to show that to me.
Exactly.
So that's fantastic advice. And especially for the young career people and people that are listing startups and founders as they're bringing people on their team, you show them to the kind of founder that you are, and the kind of C-level that you are, that, just what someone said. I know, I love this word. Someone said, I was talking to a gal professional, and she said, well, they haven't upgraded themselves yet. And I love that.
Exactly.
We need to upgrade ourselves to what we want, what we aspire to be, and how we aspire to lead and all that. So great advice.
Yeah. Well, and you should also have personal challenges. I remember I started, and even though I graduated top of my class,
Of course you did. I just said,
well, I was a little bit nerdy at that time. So,
It's all good.
but the fun thing is that I decided to take some challenges. So we don't have time to explain, how I ended up working at a reception desk, even though I had a good start job offer when I graduated. I made some decisions because I wanted to challenge myself. They didn't turn out like I wanted. Had to go back to the drawing board, and I said, well, this is the industry I want to work, which is nonprofit, and they're working for a university. But I started at the reception desk. And I remember that I had this faculty member that would come through the door. It wasn't our department. It was the department behind our department. They just needed to access through our space, and would never look at me, and will never, I guess, acknowledge I existed and I was there, because I'm a friendly person, or at least I think so. And I will say, good morning and all of that, smile, and So I remember my colleagues saying, "Oh, Emmanuel, don't worry, because everyone that is in the reception, it's invisible to him, and we've been there for years, and he's never addressed us for anything, right?" And sadly, was a faculty member that thought was next to God. So I took that as a challenge to say, you know what? I'm gonna make that happen. And it took me about a year and a half. Every single day, he went through those doors, either in and out, it was either have a good day or have a good night or good morning. And sometimes we'll offer, a candy or coffee or whatever. And until one day, he did pay attention to me. And actually, from that moment on, I was his closest ally. If he needed something, he will come to me, and I will find a way to solve the problem. And if I needed something, he was one of the few that could fix it for me. But no one else he will do that for. So for me, that meant a lot because it also means, that how you treat people matters, and people pay attention whether they want to accept it or not. And at some point, most likely they will reciprocate.
Great story. Good for you too. I mean, that's a lot of grit, that long of a period of time.
Yeah, I mean,
Just not letting it affect you personally or becoming offended by it, which that could be a whole other issue, part of it, but very good. Well, it's definitely was his gain to get to know you as a friend. So I have to ask the question because we are running out of time. So I've got to ask you that question. That story is almost an answer to that question. But can you share something with us that no one knows about you?
Well, I kind of thought hard about that because when we were talking about, the interview, you say, Emmanuel, think about, but that no one knows. Well, let's just say one or two people know it, which is, I still have a little bit of fear when we talk about going back into the entrepreneurial realm. I worked with so many entrepreneurs and as a mentor, as a coach, and I get the entrepreneurial bug. Sometimes when I see a great idea and some of them kind of want me to work closer with them, I kind of want to get back into the swing of things. And I guess right now, just being more of an executive with my dean position and more of an entrepreneur because I have the flexibility and the freedom to really innovate within my organization, that I don't have the need to spin off into my own thing. But sometimes when I think about it, it's just sometimes kind of fear what stops you to do it. And I think it helps me connect with the founders because they're on the other side. And their fear is completely different because it's about what happens if I can make payroll, what happens if this. And I don't think we talk too much about it, but sadly there's a big percentage of entrepreneurs that suffer from depression, sometimes suicide.
Yeah.
And that's something that motivates me to, whenever I get the opportunity, like now, maybe talk about those things that we usually don't talk about. And you might talk to other people and say, well, that's kind of like a lame excuse, or we shouldn't have fear. We should take that as a thing to motivate us. Well, to each person, their own. But that's something that I don't share that often. But when I do, which is very few instances, well, I guess now when people listen to this, more people will know about it. I think it has meaning and power to it because more people than not might go through the same. And just because they don't share, then we have all these other sad statistics that, we don't also talk too much about them either way.
No, thanks for sharing. And just because people don't talk about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Correct.
And it's not an easy solve. It's not just I do know about mental or healthy mental health is that it's deep and wide and no one size fits all for sure. So thank you for sharing, Emmanuel. You're awesome, and I can't wait to fill the notes for the show. How people can learn about more of the programs at St. Petersburg College, and plug in and connect with you. You're a helper of people, so I'm excited for them to connect with you. And I thank you so much for being our guest on What No One Knows.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the invitation. Very honored. And for those interested, you can find me on LinkedIn or our, SPC website.
Thank you, and thank you for listening.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for listening to our show, What No One Knows. If you'd like more information regarding our guests, it's in the description below, as well as if you'd like to work with our publishing and promotion team, that you can also find in the links. Thank you.